Watching RT live from Moscow. Well, straight to our top story now. The derailment of a Russian commuter train in which at least 25 people have been killed is being treated as a possible act of terrorism. It's feared the death toll could rise, with 18 people still unaccounted for and dozens injured after several carriages went off the line on the way from Moscow to St Petersburg on Friday night. The rescue operation is intensifying. 7 helicopters have been sent to the scene, some 250 miles northwest of Moscow. The cause of the disaster, which happened at 9:30 p.m. local time, has not yet been confirmed. However, a criminal case on charges of terrorism and arms trafficking has been launched by Russia's prosecution office. Authorities are also considering a power outage or track malfunction as possible causes. President Medvedev has held a video conference with officials at the Emergencies Ministry headquarters, who have briefed him on what's being done. Well, for the very latest on this, we're now joined live by 2 of our correspondents. Matt Trezor is near the scene of the crash, and Oksana Boyko is at the Moscow train station where the train started its journey. Hello to you both, but to you first, Matt. What's been happening at the scene?
Well, the scene's been pretty quiet for the last couple of hours. We've been parked out here near the main village of where the main village that is closest to the scene of the train derailment, and it's been pretty quiet. We have militia, which are the local police that have been kind of milling around and keeping control of the scene. We've seen some ambulances going back and forth, but no obvious victims inside, and everything seems to be pretty much now in a cleanup and recovery mode, so to speak. Earlier, we got as close. We're about 6 kilometers away from the scene of the derailment right now. Earlier, we had gotten as close as 2 kilometers away. Couldn't see the train itself up close, but we got close enough to see some of the unfortunate victims of the accident. We saw about 16 bodies of the victims splattered with blood, with their jackets wrapped around their faces, lining the track like so many pieces of cordwood. It was tragic. It really makes this tragedy hit home. It's tough to be objective when you can see the actual effects of a tragedy such as this. We did speak with some of the eyewitnesses to the accident. Here's what they had to say.
It was around 9 p.m. I was reading a newspaper, then there was a loud crackle and the carriage started leaning. I was thrown out of my seat and dragged several meters along the carriage. A total of 3 carriages derailed, but only 2 of them actually overturned. We carried 20 people out with very serious injuries. There were 3 women, but they died. We couldn't save them. There was a little girl. I think she's fine. She can move on her own.
Now, as you can see, there's a train coming along behind me here, so they have gotten traffic back moving, I guess, on some of these lines, but I still don't know exactly the extent to which they've really cleared this track. I'm not really sure exactly where this train is coming from or where it's headed. There is a recovery effort underway. Hopefully you can hear me clear enough with all this noise. A recovery effort underway to collect the bodies or perhaps some of the wounded who may yet be in the area of this incident. We've seen helicopters buzzing the area. One came close to us here searching for victims as part of this recovery effort. I understand we have a message from an official who's in charge of that recovery. Let's listen to him now.
The carriages have already been lifted, and we're expecting a report on the results of the search and rescue work. All our branches are involved. Medics and psychologists are providing assistance on the ground. We're getting ready to transport relatives of the passengers from Moscow and St Petersburg to Tver for identification.
Just a couple of vital statistics about this trip before I hand it over to a colleague of mine. This is a very popular train line between Moscow and St. Petersburg. 663 people purchased tickets to ride this train, which left Moscow at around 7 o'clock. The incident, the derailment, happened at around 9:15. There were 12 cars on the train, the last 3 of which derailed. We are hearing figures. The official death toll stands now at 25. We're hearing that may go as high as 39. But for more on the efforts of the recovery and people who are traveling from Moscow to here to identify the dead, let's go live to my colleague Oksana Boyko, who's standing by in Moscow.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. As far as we understand, there has been some delay in the transportation of relatives of people who were on that train. They are expected to be taken to the city of Tver, where most of the bodies were taken and where many of the injured are now being treated. As you can imagine, many of their relatives are in a state of a deep trauma. They're being accompanied by doctors and psychologists, and many of them are still holding to this very last hope that something, just something, may have helped their loved ones to escape death on the board of that train. Earlier this morning, we heard a story of two young women from Moscow who bought tickets for this very train, hoping for a weekend of sightseeing. But after buying these electronic tickets, they forgot to print them out, and as a result, they weren't let onto that train. For some time, their names were listed among the names of the passengers. They were listed as missing, but as you can imagine, now their families are quite relieved to find out that they are okay, especially given that their seats were in one of these three cars that were derailed during this incident. Now, as for the cause of the crash, the investigative committee has already confirmed that they are looking at a terror attack as the main lead. They have a couple of factors pointing to that. Many eyewitnesses reported hearing a loud slap before the train derailed. They are also reporting seeing a crater about 1 meter in diameter close to the rail track. Here's what a spokesperson for the General Prosecutor's Office had to tell about the cause, about the possible cause of this tragedy.
We have launched an investigation into the crash of the Nevsky Express train. A criminal case was launched on charges of terrorism and arms trafficking. The Prosecutor General has taken the investigation under his personal control. The deputy, along with other high-ranking officials and investigators, are already on their way to the crash site. Already now, traffic investigators are working on the spot.
Well, as Matt pointed out earlier on, this is a very popular train, and it has already been a target for bombers before. Back in 2007, an explosive device was planted underneath the rails, and it led to explosion 2 years ago that resulted in about 30 people being injured, though no casualties, no deaths were reported back then. In 2007, that explosion was linked to militants from the North Caucasus, but whether it is indeed the case this time around, as many people speculate, is still to be ascertained by the investigation. As of now, the investigative committee hasn't made any statements, any remarks as to who they believe might be behind this explosion, if indeed it was an explosion in the first place. Now, President Medvedev just a short while ago held a video conference with the officials on the ground, calling for all the services to provide all the necessary assistance, both to the passengers who were on that train, to their relatives, as well as to all the other passengers across Russia that have been affected by this incident. About 60 trains across central Russia were delayed as a result of this crash, and 27,000 people are still believed to be stuck in those trains, either being diverted to other destinations or just being stopped at various stations across central Russia.
Okay, Oksana Boyko in Moscow and Matt Schrezer near the scene of the tragedy. Thank you both for now. Well, apart from the blast of 2 years ago that Oksana just mentioned, several fatal accidents have occurred on the Russian railways in recent years. In December 2003, an explosion tore through a morning commuter train in the southern Stavropol region, killing nearly 50 people. 2 years later, a passenger train heading from Chechnya to Moscow derailed about 150 kilometers from the Russian capital. 42 people were injured in that incident, and another serious rail accident happened in June 2008. 12 people were hurt when a passenger train collided with a freight train in southwest Russia.